Last week, the citizens of Hong Kong voted overwhelmingly for democracy. How Beijing will likely respond is why we should care. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. This past weekend, pro-democracy advocates in Hong Kong won what the New York Times characterized as a stunning victory in local elections. Not only did a record number of voters turn out, something widely seen as a referendum on the ongoing anti-Beijing protest, but pro-democracy forces won 389 of 452 parliamentary seats. That's more than triple their previous total. And meanwhile, pro-Beijing forces saw their total seats collapse from more than 300 to just 58. Now, the obvious question is, how will Xi Jinping and his communist cadres respond to this unmistakable show of support for the protesters that have given them so much trouble for so long? The most likely answer? Not well. Beijing's proxies in Hong Kong have already stepped up their use of force against protesters. A week ago, police stormed the campus of Hong Kong Polytechnic University using water cannons, tear gas, and beanbag rounds against what it dubbed cold-blooded rioters. After, the police superintendent made it clear that using real bullets was not off the table. Well, these election results make those real bullets even more likely. Here's why. Despite everything we hear about China's ascendancy, China's a lot weaker than it appears, especially economically. China's economic growth has already slowed to its, quote, slowest pace in nearly 3 decades of modern record-keeping, and all indicators suggest that the slowdown will only continue. As one commentator put it, its labor force is shrinking, and the country is already full of roads, rails, and factories, limiting potential new investment. That shrinking labor force, which has even forced the Chinese government to reduce the size of its military, is largely due to 3 decades of the disastrous one-child policy. And given the dramatic gender imbalance caused by the policy, the consequences of this very bad idea will continue for generations to come. Additionally, many scholars are suggesting that China's economic boom wasn't quite as miraculous as everyone once assumed. In fact, China now faces what Denny McMahon, formerly of the Kissinger Center on China, has dubbed a, quote, Great Wall of Debt. Now, all of this is very bad news for the Communist Party, whose source of legitimacy, as we've talked about before on Breakpoint, is economic growth. For the past 40 years, the Chinese people have been asked to trade certain freedoms for increasing prosperity. That trade-off has preserved a measure of social order, but it's a fragile balance, and it's sure to collapse if the prosperity goes away. It's no coincidence that Xi Jinping's cult of personality and the crackdown on religious freedom took off around the same time that China's economy began to slow. And at the same time, a renewed call for Chinese nationalism not only effectively distracted the population from these growing economic worries, it's become the useful and effective pretext for discrediting Hong Kong protesters over in the mainland. And of course, the state-run Chinese media is tirelessly advancing the narrative that the protesters are tools of Western nations who only seek to weaken China and prevent it from taking its rightful place on the world stage. All of this makes a more forceful intervention by China in Hong Kong almost inevitable. Beijing will just not sit idly by as its authority is challenged. So what can we do? The most obvious answer is pray. As I've told you, so much of the Christian activity in China flows through Hong Kong. In a sense, any assault on Hong Kong is part of the larger war on Chinese Christianity. And we should also insist that the fate of Hong Kong's democratic movement becomes a priority in our foreign policy. Now, I realize how difficult that seems, especially given our current trade war, but there can be no business as usual with a regime that threatens real bullets against people demanding legitimate freedoms. Now, on another note, we're nearing the end of the year, and if you value the daily dose of sanity that you get from Breakpoint each and every day, please, would you make your year-end gift at breakpoint.org/podcast? We'll put the link in the show resources. Again, it's breakpoint.org/podcast. Your gift will help us raise the $475,000 we need to start next year strong and to give even more Christians the clarity, the confidence, and the courage they need to serve God in this cultural moment. Again, you can make your gift at breakpoint.org/podcast. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.